Welcome to the I Now Pronounce You Divorced podcast, where we have three award-winning family law attorneys dive into intriguing topics like divorce, military divorce, custody and visitation, trust and estate planning, and all things family law. Join us as we provide a comprehensive viewpoint through the eyes of our experts and guests, aiming to educate and soothe our listeners. Get ready to tune in because I Now Pronounce You Divorced starts right now. Hi, I'm Rebecca Malone, and welcome to I Now Pronounce You Divorced, where we talk about everyday issues that face couples that are going through divorces. So today I am joined by Dan Cuneo, the COO, and I again am Rebecca Malone with Malone Hatley PC. So Dan, we've got an interesting topic today. We wanted to talk about experts and how you can use an expert in your divorce case. So why on earth would you ever need an expert in a divorce case?
Sure. And it's a great topic because I feel a lot of practitioners and even clients too, when they think or even hear the word expert, their automatic assumption is I'm going to trial, or this is going to cost me a lot of money, or it's just going to drag it out even more. And that's not always the case. And quite frankly, it's rarely the case in the sense of your case usually going to trial. But getting an expert, it's great because it can help identify issues that you weren't aware of, or it could be someone that you could just lean on to help you move the case forward. If your case is in any type of discovery phase, they're a good source of information. I like using experts because it's just someone else that I can rely on to help me zealously advocate for the client. But the question really becomes, one, you want to identify an expert early in the case. You don't want to wait until you're halfway through or even closer to trial for many reasons. One would be availability of the expert. And then two, the expert that you want to hire, because availability could just mean they're not available on the date that the hearing or trial is set. Or you could be in a situation where maybe they're just not available at all. And so you want to make sure that as you're identifying issues in your case, you're also thinking about, do I need an expert? And if I do, what does that expert look like? And then you want to have those conversations with the client, because you want to make sure that the client understands why we're securing someone early as opposed to potentially late, because there is going to be a financial investment involved in that. But depending upon the type of expert you get and the financial arrangements or commitment that they're going to be asking for, maybe it's a situation where if there's a retainer, you don't put the full amount up front until there's a hearing or a trial, or maybe they offer some type of payment arrangement where you have the retainer, but you're paying on a monthly basis or whatever they would agree to, but they're still able to assist you and be available if you have any questions.
Got it. And so what types of experts are you frequently dealing with in a divorce case? Are these like psychology experts, money expert? Like what type of experts are we looking at?
Right. And the problem, sort of say, with family law is we run the gamut on everything. There's so much exposure and so many different unique issues involved in a family law case that it's unlimited as far as what type of expert you're going. But the most common ones, I mean, you hit it right there. Psychology. If there's kids involved, you want to get a child psychologist involved, or if money's at issue and there's potential exposure for paying any type of alimony or maintenance, it's the same, but just depends on the jurisdiction that you're in, on what they identify those financial payments as. Maybe you want to get a vocational expert involved, or maybe there's a business involved in the case. You want to get a business evaluation going on, or business expert. And so those are really kind of what I've seen as the most common. On the vocational expert, that's going to be someone that you want to identify early on, in the sense that if there is exposure, meaning you want to make sure you check your local rules and the statutes just to see what that looks like. And a lot of states are moving towards coming up with some type of formula or guidance on the alimony maintenance side. And so you want to be able to know, of course, what that is. And then if there is that exposure, if you think that the other side, the opposing party, is unemployed or even underemployed, then look at getting a vocational expert involved. And that's someone who's going to, usually the way it works, they'll meet with the other side and they'll have them fill out a questionnaire, maybe take some tests, and then talk to them or interview them. And based upon that information and that kind of discovery as far as what they're doing with that opposing party, then they're going to identify in your area, in that market, someone that has the same qualifications as the opposing party. This is what is out there and potentially available. And this is a salary range. And then you utilize that range and then speak to the court and really just advocate to the judge that the other side is capable of earning between this range. Of course, you always want to try to advocate on the higher end, but if they're underemployed, then you can say, listen, Your Honor, they are earning X, but based upon the review of our vocational expert, they're able to earn Y. And so we just need to be able to increase that potential earning ability for them. And that's important for many reasons, not just because there's that potential exposure on the alimony or maintenance side, but also you want to look at if there's any child support that's going to be ordered. Income on the parties is one of the factors that's considered, especially in the states where I'm licensed, and it is a factor the court has to consider when looking at child support. They put into the form, and it's going to be income of the parties. And so you want to make sure that you're looking at all aspects of your case, if there's kids involved and if there's a maintenance exposure, because finance isn't just the money itself, right? What is in bank accounts, or what are we going to be paying as far as alimony or maintenance? It's also looking at what does that child support look like, and then you want to be able to determine, okay, if we're paying X amount in child support, what is that Y going to look like on the alimony maintenance side? Because you want to make sure that you're moving your case forward, but you're protecting the best interests of your client. So that's in a very high level view of what a vocational expert is. And they're very niche, especially the ones that have been involved on the family law side for a while. So this is definitely one of those experts that I would highly recommend that you identify early and often, because you want to be able to identify who that's going to be, but you want to establish that relationship with them too, because they're going to be able to guide you along the way as far as what their findings were and how they went about it. Because if your case does go to trial, then you're going to make sure that you're in constant communication with them. So when you're preparing your direct examination, you're able to get as much into evidence as you can, and also be able to anticipate what is that other side going to challenge. Because just because you identify an expert and you have them involved and you submit your report and then it's accepted by the court, doesn't mean that the court is automatically going to rubber stamp what that expert says. So most likely the other side may counter with some other type of expert. But I would say the most common expert in these types of cases will be your vocational expert when there's financial exposure. But when you have a business involved, which if you're self-employed or you're into some type of real estate and you just develop an LLC or an S corp, whatever it may be, there is a potential value associated with that. It may just be you as the person because you're the only employee, or you may have other employees or other assets, and you want to have someone come in and really kind of do a deep dive as far as what does that business have? What are the assets? What are the liabilities? And essentially what is not just the revenue of that, but what is the actual profit and net profit of that company? Because in my experience in doing this for a while, either the other side is going to overinflate what the value of the company is, or the other side is going to substantially kind of undervalue what that is. And that's where this business evaluation comes into play, especially even if my client doesn't have a business, I may consult with one because I want to know, okay, I'm not always familiar with what types of companies are out there. And so I need someone to come in and be able to advise, okay, in this type of field, here's what we need to look at. Here's kind of what the EBITDA is, or here's what the valuation would look like. And that's someone that I always try to get involved often and early as well. So I would say probably those two are the most common in my experience.
So vocational expert, I can see that the need is going to be really clear up front. So if you have two people going through a divorce and they go in on some sort of temporary motion and someone's asking for support, then we know there's probably a need for a vocational expert. What do you do if you get an opinion that you don't like? Or what do you do if the other side won't participate, right? They're supposed to meet with the expert, they're supposed to answer questions, and what if they just don't participate in the process? How can you kind of work around that?
That can be tough, especially if they're not wanting to participate as far as meeting with my expert. And so in those situations, it's always the best, I say best practice in reaching out to the other side if they're represented by an attorney to see, is there something that we can come to an agreement on? Why is your client being so adamant on not wanting to be cooperative? And if we can't come to some type of an understanding, then I'll file a motion with the court and bring it up. Or if I know a settlements conference is coming up, or if you're just a meeting with the court, depending upon what jurisdiction you're in, I'll raise the issue then, because I want the court to know that we're trying to move this case forward, but we have to do our own due diligence to determine what is that exposure and what does that look like, so we can try to facilitate some type of settlement. And if the other side is being uncooperative, then that's really hampering and limiting my ability to represent my client. And in my experience, courts really have zero tolerance in those types of situations. Now, there are times when the other side may not be represented. And so I'll send them a certified letter just so we can document the case. And then I may have to file a separate motion, or I may have to wait until my next settlement conference with the court to raise the issue. But I want the court to know that we're trying to be able to identify what are some issues so we can overcome these and hopefully move the case towards settlement. And if they are unrepresented, then we'll just have to raise the issue with the court. And fortunately, I haven't been involved in a situation where the judge agreed with the other side, whether they're represented or not. There were some instances where the judge said, I'm going to order that they participate, but if it comes back that it's not helpful or it doesn't really aid me, meaning the judge, in making a decision, then you may be liable for some of their fees. And that's a risk that is usually worth taking, because if you're at that point where you're identifying an expert and you want to get them involved, you know that there's that exposure on payment. And it's not just payment for maybe a diminutive amount of time, which would, in my opinion, be probably just a couple years or less. It's something substantial where it could be a substantial amount of money per month over an indefinite period of time or over a substantial amount of time. And so we really need to make sure that we do our own due diligence in representing our client.
So when you have a vocational expert, are there typically like one for each side, or is there only one expert involved? What does that usually look like?
You can agree to have one. I wouldn't recommend that, because you're really gambling and rolling the dice that that expert is going to come back and be somewhat advantageous for you. But it's usually, if I identify an expert, then the other side may counter with one. So usually when an expert gets involved, it's more common, at least where I practice, than that the other side's going to secure one as well. It's not mandatory. At least where I practice in the states I'm licensed in, it's not mandatory to get experts, and not every client wants one or can afford one. And that's also something, going back to what we were talking about earlier. When you have these conversations with your clients, you need to know what the cost of the expert is going to be. And that's not just what the retainer is, but what their hourly rate is. And in your own experience, how much time is going to be put into that. And then if you're new to practicing law, or new to family law, or even just not that familiar with getting experts involved, you can ask the expert and just say, can I just get a range? You can't hold them to it, because it's, there's, in this type of law, we can't just say, all right, we're going to put in X amount of time and that's it. But in their experience and their practice and being involved in cases and issues like this, they'll be able to give you a pretty good range as far as what that would look like. And the range may not just be from a dollar amount, but it could be, if you're just using me as guidance or advice, I just charge per hour, however long we need one another. Or if it's going to be X dollars until we go to a deposition, then maybe it's more, or the rate increases, or it's more money if we have to prepare for trial, go to trial, and things like that. So those are definitely conversations you want to have with the expert, but also you want to be able to educate the client, not just on the importance of it, but what that cost would be. And then the client can make that informed decision. And there are some times where it's just not affordable. And so then we just need to pivot and make sure that we're putting on the best case forward.
Right. So you also talked about business valuation experts, and this is always such a tricky area because business owners get a lot of benefit sometimes from their businesses without necessarily looking like it on paper. So it can be a difficult thing to decipher. When you bring in a business valuation expert, what types of things are they looking for? Like, what are their big red flags and what are their big like fines that then you're getting to use in your case?
Sure. Yeah, you're spot on. There's so many benefits. And of course, there should be benefits when you're a business owner, but you want to make sure that they're the benefits pursuant to the IRS. And a lot of times what I'm seeing is business owners are going to run everything through the business and may have nothing to do with the business. And here's kind of the caveat to that. I'm not saying that that's inappropriate or shouldn't happen, but in the family law case, when at least on our side, when we're trying to value what the company is worth. Some of the deductions that you're allowed pursuant to the IRS may actually not be essentially, we'll say, allowed when we're looking at the business side of it, when we're trying to figure out what is the valuation of that. And that could be imputed as income, or it could just be taken out as far as an expense. Because if you're the business owner, you're going to want to try to get as many expenses in there. So you're not only just cutting back on what the potential revenue is, but what your net profit is, which then is going to, of course, affect what the value of the company is. But if you're on the other side, you want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence and really combing through the records to see what is exactly is being deducted as an expense, or are there things being held in the future that they're not really claiming now because the case is pending or the case is filed. So you really want to talk to your expert to know, okay, what is the normal course of action, we'll say, for this type of a business? Like, what is the normal procedure for this? And how often do you think that they should be collecting revenue? And it sounds kind of silly and simple, but at the same time, I've had cases where they've been collecting revenue on a pretty good cadence, and all of a sudden a case is filed, or shortly before it's filed, they're a little bit more accommodating to their clients and saying, oh, well, you can just pay me later, or, I'll put you on a payment plan, but the company's never done a payment plan, or how about we just defer certain things? And that's what you really want to look at. And those are some of those red flags. And then expenses are, of course, always the biggest red flag as far as what is being ran through the company as an expense versus what is an actual expense of the company for your case, not for the IRS, but just to make sure that we're looking at what is a true valuation of what that potential company is. And then you also need to look at how many employees do they have and what are they paying them? Are they paying them a wage that's sufficient under the IRS rules? Or are they making sure you're paying the minimum wages? Because I've also seen where they have friends come in and they're just paying them on the side in cash, or they're having their girlfriend or boyfriend involved in the company, and they're paying them something entirely different, not paying them at all to kind of help back as far as on the expense side. So there's so many different avenues and paths, and you can go down many rabbit holes, but it's worth it if the company is, been around for a while, or there's substantial revenue involved, or you want to just make sure that you're looking underneath every stone, that if you do walk away from this company, that you're not regretting your financial interest, because there is an interest in it. You want to make sure that you get whatever that value is, and usually it's going to be from the date of the marriage until date of divorce. And definitely check with your attorney, because it does vary from state to state as far as what that interest look like. But even if you're not involved, because some probably listening to this are thinking, well, my spouse owns a company, but I have nothing to do with it, and I've never been involved in this, so I don't have any interest in it. And that's not always true, because it's really going to go back to, where I'm licensed at the date of the marriage. So there is a component of what your interest is, and it just may be financial. Now, it does get even more convoluted and complicated if you have a company and both parties are involved and both parties want the company.
Yeah, definitely. So for our purposes in Virginia and in North Carolina, when we're looking at a business, we're not only looking at what's the value of that asset, just like any other asset that you're dividing in a divorce. If it's a house, if it's a retirement account, if it's a business interest, there's something that's tied to that. And looking at a realistic picture of the income. Because even though the IRS says that the deductions are all legitimate and they're okay, it still is not accurate to say, my bottom line, I'm only making $5, when in reality, you're taking a whole lot of benefit from the company. The company is, I don't know, paying your mortgage, or, paying
Right.
expenses on your behalf, providing you with a vehicle. You're getting all of these additional benefits that you're otherwise not having to pay for. With business valuation, I feel like the other huge piece of this is how late most business owners file their tax returns. So if right now you were trying to get a financial picture of company in 2024, right? We're in the beginning, right? First quarter, second quarter of 2024. Most companies have not filed their 2023 taxes yet. So we're going all the way back to 2022 to look at tax returns. And that can be completely different than what's going on today. So in order to figure out what's going on today, we have to have some sort of expert come in and and figure it out and do some unwinding. Um, what sort of documents are you providing to your expert, and how are you getting them for them to be able to figure out what this thing is worth?
Right. And that's a great question. And it goes back to what we were saying in the beginning of this episode is identifying someone early. And early is advantageous because in this example or question, it's there are some businesses out there that we're not familiar with. And that's fine because there's just so many of them that are out there. But you want to make sure on the due diligence side that when you have that expert involved, say talk to them and just I advise them, the opposing side has this type of a company. What documents would you need in order to really dig in and value what that company is worth? Because once you have those from the expert, then you can put that in a discovery request, more likely in the form of request for production of documents, and then send it over. Because then you're able to get the documents that you need. And if the other side can't provide them, well, then that's an issue that needs to be raised with the court. But also, it's going to be an issue when you're looking at the valuation of the company. But then if they do need to provide the document, but need some time, then that's going to go to your point. Well, then that'll identify, did they file taxes? And when was the last time they filed? And why are they not filing them? What's going on? Is this something that's
Mhm.
in the normal course of business for them that they file late? Or is this just something that it's like a delay tactic or something that they can get an advantage of because they haven't filed? And that's going to be another issue. And that's going to be something you want to raise, not just with the expert you have involved, but with the court itself. And then once you start really calling into question the veracity of the documents or the veracity of the person answering these discovery, then the court often is going to kind of start maybe seeing the picture that you're trying to paint as far as what that value is. And then if you can't value it, then it becomes a little bit even more frustrating. But the court's going to lean heavily on what you think it is, because if you're not able to have these documents, then the court isn't going to say, well, then we're just going to wait and we'll take this under advisement at a later date. No, it has to be done now. And so that's why it's just so important
Right.
to get that expert involved and ask those questions. And so, you may be listening and thinking, well, I don't want to sound like I don't know what I'm doing. I always have practiced with, there are no questions that are bad questions. The ones that aren't asked are the ones that are kind of the bad ones, right? Because sometimes they may sound silly, but the expert knows that. And you just want to make sure that you're protecting and really just zealously advocating for it.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for joining me today as we talked about some experts and how you can use them in your divorce case. Again, we are Malone Hatley PC. We are your partner in divorce and estate planning. And so if you liked this, please subscribe for some more content about divorce cases and everything that our divorce clients are facing. Ask us questions, and we'll do our best to keep in touch. Thanks. Thank you for tuning into our podcast. If you found this episode helpful and you want more informational content, please be sure to subscribe and join us on all major social media platforms, including YouTube. Stay connected for more exciting updates and tips.